in this lesson, I want to talk about the nature of the lesson of unconditional love. So, at the core of this particular lesson is the idea that love, which is what you are, the state of love, is never earned. It simply is. It is that pervasive, all-encompassing energy of creation. And so often in our daily lives, in our ideologies, in our interactions, we see love as something transactional. And this is where the distortion comes in, and all of the suffering surrounding this journey back to try to find love begins. So I'm just going to run through these core aspects of integrating this lesson of high vibrational, unconditional love back into one's own being. So again, I said love, unconditional, true unconditional, deep divine love is not a transaction. There is not this back and forth. If I do this for you, then I will dole out love. If you do this for me, then love is given. There's no transaction. It just simply is an energy that exists, that is, and that should be freely given to all others and all life in the universe. Okay? Love as an energy, as a creationary energy, as the very life force of what all of us, the stuff that we're made of, it is the fundamental nature of existence. Anything else, anything that appears in our external world that is not a reflection of love is merely that thing in a distorted state. So its true state is undisturbed, it is unbothered, and remains eternally in this unconditionally loving state. But due to our own projections and the interconnectedness of especially the human conscious collective, you will see distorted aspects of things all over the place. Now, the greatest realization that one can have as they're going through the motions, their day, their concept of reality, is that the self, you, myself, we are already infinitely loved by source or by the divine nature, by everything. So love is the basic makeup of who we are, and we don't have to earn anything to experience and feel this divine love. It's not tethered to what we do. And so that doesn't mean that we don't act righteously or we don't do the correct things. But because it is our very nature, when we are calibrating with that divine energy, all we can do is the right thing, if that makes sense. And that we are worthy of love simply because we were made, that we exist. So nothing that we have to earn. And as a process of internalizing this deep, comforting, beautiful knowledge, we come to a place of rest and peace within the self. We stop searching endlessly outside of ourselves for this idea of love. You know, we see it so often in the romantic journey, or that idea that to experience love, we have to have some version of it outside of the self or on the external plane. And that's the only way that we will be able to integrate this energy of love into our consciousness and into our perceptive abilities. Okay, and when we try to, or when we start to internalize this, that our baseline is love, it opens up the corridors of our heart for a very heart-centered focus on living, a very heart-centered perception of all life and all others, even when they are in a lower distorted state. So understanding that love exists without conditions. Anything that we are experiencing that is conditional is not in alignment with the order of unconditional divine love. So let's look at some examples of this. If you are dealing with family members and they are saying, well, you have to meet these conditions in order for me to love you. If you have to be a certain way or else my love will be taken away from you. Well, that's not a representation of true divine love. Okay, that's conditional. And so that's something else. Okay, we can't call it love. It's a distorted aspect of the human projection. This often happens as well in romantic relationships, where there are so many conditions that others will give to their partner that if they don't meet these conditions, that love will be taken away, or that love will not be given because of these kind of existential requirements. And again, that is not in accordance in any way, shape, or form with divine union or divine love. It doesn't mean you can be in relationship with somebody, you can have a growth in that relationship, you can have a level of distortion within that relationship. It doesn't mean that the relationship is not worth moving through. But again, in this idea that we are all teachers and that we are all students, part of our job or part of our journey is to start to identify the blocks within ourselves that keep us at a distance from unconditional divine love. And as we start to identify these blockages, remove them, and transform them within ourselves, we can bring a more gentle, loving, compassionate, moving closer to unconditional loving energy in all aspects of our lives and our interconnected relationships along our journey. Okay, the next thing is divine love is always present. So even in our darkest hour, even when we can feel that pull of depression, or when we are feeling in a state of melancholy, when we don't feel engaged or excited about life. We've all gone through that, where it just feels like we're going through the motions and that there is no spark to our existence. And it is so important to remember that divine love is always surrounding us, even if we can't perceive it. And this is a perception problem. It is not the fact that love has left you, or God has left you, or there is not a divinity around you. Just because you cannot perceive something in the moment does not mean it doesn't exist. It's the same thing as radio waves. Just because we can't see them, we can't perceive them, we haven't turned on our radio, doesn't mean that that energy is still not moving around us and available for us to tap into at any given moment. So then it becomes, how do we tap into this divine, unconditional, loving energy? And I'm going to go through the list, but we'll come back to the how-to near the end of this video. Now, love is not earned and love is not lost. So you may move through many friendships, relationships, romantic partnerships in your life, and it can have the perception, or you can have the experience, that you are losing love, or that there is a deficit when somebody moves out of your timeline or your energy field, or even energetically in terms of the density of their being, when you lose somebody to that energetic state of their body disintegrating and them moving into the energetic realm. Okay, but the love is never lost. The experience of that love, the assimilation of that bond into the very fabric of what you are, that will always radiate and always be a part of your consciousness can never leave you. This is why when loved ones die, they are always held within us, and we are held within them when they are on the other side. So really feeling that deep peace and understanding that death is not the end. And loss does not necessarily mean loss forever. Sometimes we have individuals that will move in and out of our, does not necessarily mean loss forever. Sometimes we have individuals that will move in and out of our, superficial reality, but that doesn't mean that in a different timeline, in a different state, that we won't come back into that union of love with those individuals. Because remember, everything is energy, everything is interconnected, and everything emanates from divine love, which is the source of creation. Okay. Guilt and fear block love. So we were talking about the how-tos, how to perceive divine love. So it's important to talk about the blockages to understanding and feeling and connecting with that energy of unconditional love. And when we are in fear, and when we are in a state of guilt, anger, frustration, bitterness, sadness, depression, any of these lower vibrational states, we are blocking the flow. It doesn't mean that love isn't there. It means that we have essentially within ourselves put up a force field that doesn't let us perceive that beautiful, loving energy. And it doesn't also mean that there's anything wrong with us. When we are in this state of non-transference or non-receptiveness to unconditional loving energy, it simply means that we are going through a certain aspect of catalyst, a certain aspect of distortion within our own energy field, where we are either learning about the context of what these higher level emotional states and consciousness states are through the context of knowing it's other, so knowing what it is not. And these lessons are just as important and just as deep in terms of the totality of our understanding. So it's not a negative thing if you move into a state where you cannot perceive this unconditional love. But don't, mark my words, and unmistakably, this loving energy will come again. Once you've moved through the blockages and the lessons that you're meant to move through in any given season of your life, there is always a time where that joyful, beautiful, warm energy of unconditional love will return to your consciousness. But you do have to be diligent about identifying these blockages. Fear is a terrible one. When we are contracted, when we are in fear, we are afraid to get out, we are afraid to engage, we are afraid to give our love to others. We are afraid of life itself. We are afraid of the dangers of the world. All of these things that fear precipitate 100% block love. And when we are acting this way, and when we are acting small, it is very difficult to tap into that beautiful, all-pervasive, divine loving energy. Guilt is another one. When we see others and the self as guilty, when we are layering judgment on ourselves and others, we are 100% blocking the energy of unconditional love. This doesn't mean that we applaud ourselves or others when we are thinking in a distorted fashion or acting because of distorted thinking in a distorted fashion, when we are acting from lower vibrational thought forms. Doesn't mean that we accept that behavior, but we don't judge it. We simply move through whatever is going on in our now moment and try to look for the silver lining. Try to look for the lessons, the beauty. A reminder of this, or a really great example of this, a cinematic example of this, is I believe the movie Life is Beautiful. It's about a Nazi concentration camp where the main actor brings joy and lives his life to the fullest, even in the most dire circumstances. And what a movie like this is demonstrating is that even in extreme levels of chaos and violence and negativity and distortion, because that's what it is, it's all distorted behaviors that are coming, and they're the root of any war, any violent act is the distortion or the blockage of divine loving energy, and usually rooted also in fear and judgment. But in this particular movie, love was the energy that the main character brought to each and every day. And even though the circumstances were insurmountable, the energy that he brought to those other individuals in that concentration camp was a beautiful, inspiring, loving energy. So really understanding that you are always your own block, no matter what you see. And I've gone through this many times in my life where the circumstances can be really overwhelming, and I choose to see the beauty even through the darkness. I choose to find the most beautiful things in the moment, because that is what raises my consciousness. And that is what also helps to raise the frequency, the vibration, the light in others around myself. When you can try to point the consciousness to where the corrections can be, and to see things in a non-judgmental, compassionate, merciful way, but also always looking for the good in every situation, or what can be learned. Sometimes there's not a lot of good in a situation, but there's a lot of catalysts for learning. So even that can be brought back to a positive aspect. Now, guilt in terms of seeing others as guilty, seeing the self as guilty. Anytime we are residing in this type of energy, we are doing no favors to ourselves, and we are doing no favors to others. When we are projecting guilt on others, and when we are condemning them and judging them, we never know the whole aspect of the story. We never know all of the reasons why. So we're not in a position, we're not in that high level bird's eye view to know everything that came before, that precipitated whatever is going on in the moment. And that doesn't mean that there aren't distortion. That doesn't mean that the other isn't incorrect in some aspect, but we are not the judge of that, okay? And so if we start to act as the judge of that, we become bitter, angry, vengeful, all of these things that are the seeds of hate and distortion within the self. So of course, those type of feelings are going to be an absolute block to unconditional divine love. Now let's kind of tilt the mirror back on the self. We are often the most harsh on ourselves, and that's a good thing and a difficult thing at the same time. It's important that we do hold ourselves to a high standard, but when it comes to perpetuating guilt in the consciousness, it doesn't do us any good. The purpose of us learning from our mistakes is to use our spiritual sight and use the intelligence of our consciousness to identify anything that was a distortion and make that correction. So if it's incorrect, you correct it. You identify it and you correct it. And continuing to cycle through this journey, this forward momentum of identifying and correcting, is what will bring you closer and closer to that experience of that divine plan. So in practicality, it is practice makes perfect, okay? This isn't something, this is a journey. We are in Earth school. This is not meant to be infinitely easy, but the journey is worth it. And as we move through these lessons, we come into this energy of self-actualization and that communion with divine energy. One of the things that is a very powerful energy is when we learn to radiate love without expectations. So simply loving all things, all beings, all others without expecting anything from them. Simply giving our love giving our positive energy, our encouragement, and allowing that to be our static state. This is the highest emanation of how we can show up here on planet Earth. Now, knowing that love is our natural state, it does feel strange for many of us to be in this distorted state. So we often feel this energy of separateness, of isolation, of loneliness. And it is because we have created these blockages and barriers through social conditioning, through our different traumas, heartbreaks. There's so many different layers where we have blocked ourselves to that flow of divine, unconditional, loving energy. Okay, but remembering that love is and has always been our natural state, and we will always forevermore return back to it. And that is the journey we're on. We are all on this journey to return home to that state of unconditional loving energy. Now, embracing love and releasing unworthiness. So the wound of unworthiness is one of the most pervasive kind of energetic distortions that is alive and well in the population, okay? And it is difficult often to see ourselves as worthy of love. But if we can make these steps, if we can have a sense of self-pride, not a negative sense of pride, but a sense of accomplishment that we are trying, that we are growing, that we are learning. And if we can love ourselves in this innocence, in this childlike state, then we move closer to this energy of simply releasing and understanding, back to the lesson about surrendering into the understanding that we are learning, we are on a journey, and we can't know everything if we are in a contracted state, if we are blocked, and we're not always going to know all of the pieces, okay? But release this idea that we are unworthy. When we start believing truly that we are worthy of love, love will start to show up in magical, miraculous ways, because we are essentially on an energetic level calling what we believe, the law of attraction, back to us. So it is so important that we cultivate this belief of worthiness within the self, of knowing that we are worthy, of knowing that we are good enough just the way that we are, just for getting up, opening up our eyes, breathing, and then seeing the same in all sentient life. Every single bug, every single gopher, every single horse, every single dog, cat, human, you name it, doesn't matter color, gender, sexual orientation, every single being is worthy of love. Every single being is worthy. Integrating that one lesson dissolves so much hatred. Just that one lesson. And if you can integrate it, and if you can become this beacon of love, shining out that energy, wow, your whole life transforms in an instant. Just by integrating that one little piece into the framework of your ideology, you transform. It's so powerful, so incredibly powerful. And this brings me to my last point. Love transforms. When you truly integrate these lessons, when you are not in a state of being conditional, and it's difficult because we have businesses, we have relationships, we have desires and things that we want to accomplish, and we've been brought up in a society of competition where we feel that we have to be better than the other, that we have to outdo the other. This Darwinian idea of survival of the fittest doesn't leave a lot of room for unconditional love. But I am going to guarantee you, if you drop that ideology of survival, over others, this competitive nature, this need that the ego has to see itself as better, or categorize things, or put people in categories, or categorize life, categorizing the value of life, that somehow human beings are above different life forms. all of this leads to distortion within the self. So when we move back to this energy and remove all of these blockages, because they are absolutely artificial blockages, they are distortions, your entire being will be transformed by integrating these very, very simple lessons. Love transforms. It's as simple as that. You are already love. You have everything you need. You are worthy. You are a beautiful soul. You are enough. And you have embedded in you so many fantastically beautiful divine gifts. You have no idea. But you have to believe these things. You have to integrate these things inside the self to be able to crack open that divine reservoir of what you're meant to be. The only way to get there is through the energy of unconditional love. And when you reside in that energy of unconditional love, miracles happen. Absolutely they do. It transforms. It's a powerful energy. It is truly the energy of all creation. So I'm going to wrap up this lesson, but hopefully I'll see you in the next one.